Hello, my name is Freddie, and today I will be going through the political compass test. Everyone on the internet, or at least on the political internet, of similar age around me is going on about the political compass. I'm surprised that I've actually not already done it. It's actually four different squares, which kind of determines to a quite precise mathematical place where your political ideology falls. So, with no further ado, let's start the test. Page 1 of 6. I've already read the start bit. Just a few propositions to start with, concerning no less how you see the country and the world. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. I strongly agree with this. I think you are probably a morally bankrupt person if you genuinely believe that the rights and the survival of transnational corporations is more important than humanity. I'd always support my country whether it's right or wrong, strongly disagree, or I repudiate that statement completely. Only ever support your country if what it is doing is intellectually, morally, and economically correct. No one chooses his or her country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I agree with this statement, but I'm going to have to kind of elaborate on what I mean by that. I don't think it's foolish to be proud of your country by itself. If your country has done good things, that's not foolish. But to be proud of your country for the primary reason that it was the country you were born in is utterly foolish. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. I strongly disagree with that statement, and I think everyone watching this should understand why. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Okay, this is an inherently ostensible question, in the way in which originally you think, okay, if I have one enemy, someone I hate, I despise, and I oppose in almost every way possible, their enemy must have similar kind of credentials and faculties as me. But that once you contextualize it, you realise that that's wrong. I don't really have any enemies, to be honest, but let's say if ISIS was my enemy, or I could consider ISIS my enemy, the enemy of ISIS is the Taliban. Is the Taliban my friend? Certainly not. So I disagree with that statement, but a lot of the time it will be true. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. In the context which I have heard about and the context that I'm familiar with, military action that defies international law is almost always morally repugnant and abhorrent. And the examples I can give for this is the intervention in Iraq. A lot of the actions taken there did defy international law, and I thought the intervention in Iraq was an atrocity. Furthermore, all the installation of paramilitaries throughout the 20th century by various American presidents all defied international law in some way or another, and I think they were never justified and were once again morally repugnant actions. So, strongly disagree with that statement. Okay, there's now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. What does that mean? Or I think I understand that. Okay, I am certainly not sure, but I expect that this might be pressing on the idea that the information systems, which are often more entertaining, more scandalous, and shorter, like the Daily Mail and Fox News rhetoric, often go further because people enjoy reading them more. And as a direct result of that, people often are influenced very much by these terrible media sources. So I agree with that statement. If that's what it's trying to convey, it might be trying to convey something completely different. Okay, people, now the economy, we're talking attitudes here, not the FTSE index. People are ultimately divided more by class than nationality. I agree with that. And I think the original reason why people might disagree with that is that they think, well, I could potentially get on with someone if they were working class, get on with someone of upper class background, or vice versa, better than someone from my same class from Spain. But the only reason why that is true is because of the language barrier. If everyone spoke the same language, I expect people from different nationalities of the same class would be less divided than people divided by the very strong class barriers which exist within a neoliberal society. If you want to research into that more, I can put a link in the description for a study called Pew, which talks about in America the lack of social mobility and restrictions, especially for black people, when trying to climb the rungs of the class system. So I agree with that statement. Yeah. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Once again, I repudiate this statement. My rebuttal is that controlling inflation, and especially hyperinflation, does, of course, have very positive effects on the economy, and then it helps mitigate terrible effects on the economy. But in the whole, controlling unemployment is more important because, first of all, not even that it's the most important thing, but if you don't control unemployment, it's going to really stagnate the economy. Second of all, there's going to be lots of people not being able to feed their kids, not being able to feed themselves, which would be a horrible kind of breach of human rights. And finally, some people would even starve, and many businesses would fail. So I strongly disagree with this statement. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. I agree with this statement completely. I very strongly agree with this statement, and this is for the reason that in the neoliberal capitalist society that we live in this day and age, corporations, or especially the most successful corporations, are very ruthless. All they see is green, they look at money and nothing else, and therefore if it prevents them from making a profit, they will not adhere to environmental rules, or at least social conventions around the environment. And that means to save the environment and to prevent global warming and to mitigate pollution, the government should regulate the actions that these corporations make. Okay, from each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. Oh, I know what this is talking about. This is a Karl Marx quote. Quote me if I'm wrong, but I think this is a Karl Marx quote, and also quote me if I'm wrong, but I believe it points towards the idea that a communist, is it even called an economy if it's communist, but a socialist / Marxist / communist society would create a surplus of goods which could be shared by everyone. Do I think that's true? Yes. Do I think creating a surplus of goods is a positive thing? Yes. Do I agree that a communist society is the best society possible? No. I think kind of a mixed capitalist society, but with more regulation by the government, like the Scandinavian Nordic model, would be the best possible idea. But I do not repute the idea that a communist system, if ran correctly, would create a surplus of goods for the population. So I do agree with that statement. The freer the market, the freer the people. Okay, this is another inherently ostensible question. The reason for this is the kind of the wordplay and the way people think of in an extremely free market capitalist society. There isn't any regulation for corporations, which means they probably won't be able to pay wages and won't look after the environment. If everything around, all the trees around you are burning and you're getting paid 1p an hour, I don't think you're that free, so I strongly repudiate this statement. It's a sad reflection of our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. I agree. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. I disagree with that statement. I think land should be bought and sold. I think maybe the government should own a certain amount of land which it can allocate to people like they used to do with council houses to have their own house on to grow their own crops. But apart from that, I think it should be sold as a commodity. I agree. I think some I can't remember the name, but the American man who became a billionaire by changing the cost of a vial of insulin from like £2.50 to $750, had a monopoly kind of from the insulin business and made profits, and people died. So I strongly agree with that. Okay, protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. I unequivocally agree with the statement proposed here. Protectionism, in my opinion, is almost always necessary in trade, unless you are in a trading bloc such as the European Union, which has very similar labour standards. I'll give an example to kind of back this up. let's say if we had a trade deal with Pakistan, Pakistan has many different, Pakistan is a country which, let's say we had a football trade deal, and that we had a football industry inside our country, and a lot of jobs inside our country depended on us making footballs and selling it to the British population. And Pakistan also made footballs. And if we had a zero tariff trade deal, which would kind of not be protectionism at all, because they have cheaper labour laws, they'd be able to make footballs for a lower price, and therefore their footballs would flood our market, and it would destroy the businesses of all the British football makers. And that kind of applies to every single thing inside the economy. So therefore, or at least all the goods inside the economy, I agree that protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade, almost always necessary in trade, so strongly agree with that one. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. Wrong. A company should also have a social responsibility to look after the environment and furthermore look after its workers. Let's go this way. The rich are too highly taxed. Strongly disagree with that. I don't think they are taxed enough. I think the Tories, I might be wrong by a few billion, but since they've become in charge, they've taken £72 billion in tax revenue for the rich out of the budget, and therefore the rich are getting taxed a lot less. And at the same time, our NHS is failing. Our education system is crippled. Social care system is crippled, and our public services are doing very, very badly. So therefore, I think rich aren't highly taxed enough until society is working for the poorest people. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. Disagree. The reason why I disagree is that maybe when the NHS is really struggling, it is better to have some private health services, not connected or funded by the government, but funding themselves so that there isn't as much strain and rich people can go to private health services. But I don't think that someone with, cancer because they're richer should get better care than someone who's not as rich. I think that's once again, it's a morally repugnant idea. Government should penalise businesses that mislead the public. I agree. If a business lies to the public, they should of course be penalised. They're making profit of lying. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. I would agree with that. I think a key component of a free market is everyone can buy and sell. And not everyone can buy and sell if they're a major monopoly. So I agree with that statement. Okay, abortion when a woman's life is not threatened should always be illegal. Strongly disagree. Women can do whatever they want with their own body, and it's no concern of anyone else except from themselves. All authority should be questioned. I strongly agree with this statement. I'm a huge, not fan, I'm a huge admirer of the work of Noam Chomsky, and he is an anarchist. In case you didn't know, an anarchist is not someone who likes to set buildings on fire and throw bricks through windows. They're someone who wants to question authority and ask it to justify its existence. So I very much agree that all authority should be questioned. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Once again, an inherently ostensible question. And the reason that it is inherently ostensible is that originally you think, okay, that sounds like a fair idea. If someone does this to me, I should be allowed to do it back to them. But then once again, you contextualise it and you realise it is a horrible idea. First of all, death penalty is predicated on the original kind of moral or philosophical idea of eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, but I repudiate that idea, and we can go on to why, because I am almost 100% sure there will be questions on the death penalty in the ethics section or the religious section of this question, so I'll talk about that later. But another example I like to give is if you're preschool or at primary school and a kid punches another kid in the face and gives them a nosebleed, they shouldn't be then punched in the face themselves. That isn't a good idea, and I don't think anyone would agree that's a good idea, and that instantly kind of destroys the argument that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is always the right thing to do. I agree sometimes it's the right thing to do, and it's a right philosophical analogy to use when fulfilling justice, but in certain situations it's not, so disagree. Okay, taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theatres or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. Wow, I don't think have enough detail to answer this question. It depends on the state of the economy and the amount of tax revenue that the government are taking in. If the economy is in a brilliant place, the health service, education service, and all the other public services are in a good place, and there's not much poverty in the country, I think they could afford to tax people and then to prop up theatres and museums if they're of imperative if they're imperative to the culture. But if the economy is in a bad place and the public services are in a bad place, I would disagree with that. But let's just pretend that we live in a brilliant utopia. I would agree. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. Depends on what age. I definitely don't think they should from 16, 17 and 18, I think. But it's not necessarily forced upon you. You either have to go to college, you have to go, I remember, like 2 days a week at college. And then after you've done 2 days a week at college, you can do your apprenticeship. But really, I think from the age, you should go to education from the age of about 6 to 14. And if you're 14 years of age and you know that the academia is not for you in any way and you're a more practical person, you think your life would be of more use if you went into one of the trades, go do an apprenticeship. It's equally as important. It's far more important to your education if you go do an apprenticeship than rather learn about maths, chemistry, physics, and English for, I don't know, like 4 more years. So, no, I disagree. I don't think I need to explain this question at all. I fundamentally disagree with this statement. I think everyone should. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. Disagree. I don't think you're the best parent in the world if you repeatedly spank your children to try and discipline them. I agree. It is natural for the children to keep some secrets from their parents. Possessing marijuana, weed, for personal use should not be a criminal offence. I unequivocally agree with this. If you're over 25 and your front cortex has fully developed, there is pretty much no negative effect of smoking weed, and if you're not giving it to anyone else, you should never ever get in trouble with the justice system for having it. So I strongly agree. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation and find jobs. I agree. I think there's very important aspects of schooling as well, like making friends, creating a social group, learning social standards, becoming passionate, and just kind of gaining a greater understanding of the world around us. But I think the prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs, or at least equip them with the qualifications which are necessary for them to get the jobs. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. Strongly disagree. They can do whatever they want with their bodies, like I've established before. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. Strongly disagree. We would live in a very sorry world if the first thing we want to teach kids to accept the authoritarian rule above them. Definitely not. They should learn a lot more things before they learn how to accept discipline. I don't really know what this means. I know savage and civilized people, they're only different cultures. To be honest, I really don't get. I don't know if it's tapping into racism or non-racism. To be honest, I think pretty much everyone's civilized these days. I think it's not like one culture would seem uncivilized to us. I think all cultures seem civilized to me, apart from some kind of literalist religious cultures. But I'll go disagree with that. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not accept society's support. I disagree with this statement, and I think have many of you are watching. I would say 75% of you will be like, why? Why do you disagree with this statement? But I will elaborate. I don't think people should die for the death penalty, and I think most people would agree that people shouldn't be killed for violent attacks, and or at least shouldn't be given a life of misery for violent attacks or other pretty severe crimes. And someone who's too lazy and refuses to work should not be thrown out, given no welfare, and left to rot on the street or even starve to death. So I disagree. I think maybe, like, if society's in a terrible place, that shouldn't be the first thing they're looking at, but it's a very important role of society to look after everyone. When you're troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I completely agree with that. But then again, if that I expect mental health is an incredibly complicated thing, and it might not make some people better. So I agree, because I think it will the majority of the time. But I'm not saying if you feel anxious or depressed, you shouldn't just go out and do things which you normally enjoy, because that might not always help you. You should kind of do whatever you want to do. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their country. I strongly disagree with this statement. I know some first generation immigrants, and I think they have immigrated into our country better than a lot of people whose great grandparents were born within a 20-mile radius of where they were born. What's good for the most successful corporations is ultimately good for all of us. Strongly disagree with that statement. In the short term, it would be good for Amazon to pay their workers 1p an hour and pollute the environment, but would it be good for the rest of us? Certainly not. No broadcasting institution, however independent in its content, should receive public funding. I'm not sure on this one. I don't think public funding is a bad thing, so I have to agree. I'm not too clued up on that subject. Okay, so how you see the wider society. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counter-terrorism. I just disagree with that. It's hard to really go into that. I'm not 100% sure what it means. I think it's kind of tapping into the right-wing idea that, oh, we're not allowed to incite violence anymore because of terrorist attacks, so like my civil liberties are being restricted, when that's unequivocally untrue, so I disagree. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in the democratic political system. I'll elaborate on this. I think it is inherently advantageous to get kind of political discussions over with and come up with an answer, but it doesn't mean like it's advantageous within time and efficiency, but it doesn't necessarily mean it will lead to anything which is good. In the same way that a hung parliament's not that advantageous, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. Let me elaborate on that. So let's say if you in the American election, which of course is really a two-party state, I really hope I'm right, and I'm not sure I am, but I expect Joe Biden will win, become the president, okay, and then and as his president would then and then the Senate will be taken by the Republicans, and that will mean that Joe Biden's bills will never really get through the Senate, so the progress of the political system will be halted for at least 2 years, and that is a pretty bad thing. And then in China, which is a one-party state, if they decide some policy, it will go through it instant. They say, okay, we're gonna go through with this. But that does not necessarily mean what they go through will be good, but it is on kind of the first level advantageous. So I agree with that, but not strongly agree. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only the wrongdoers need to be worried. In a certain sense, I agree with this statement, but I disagree with it, because if someone's looking at your search history or looking at what you're doing every day of your life, you have a right to privacy, and it doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong if you don't want the state to monitor every single action you take. So I disagree. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. I disagree with this, and once again, it's kind of an ostensible statement. And the reason I believe this is predicated on 3 different points. First of all, the death penalty is often awarded, or no, it's not really an award. People are often sentenced to death for doing horrible crimes, and these people who have done the horrible crimes are almost exclusively psychopaths and sociopaths. Psychopaths and sociopaths almost always don't really fear death, which means the death penalty is almost a relief for them. They don't have to spend 20 years in prison rotting away. All they have to do is just die, and they don't really care about it. Second reason is that 4% of death penalty people who are executed in America are later found to be guilty. Found to be innocent, found to be not guilty. So therefore, plus 4%, that's literally, I would say, hundreds of innocent lives being taken. And if you send them to prison, maybe 3 years wasting away in prison, but then they'd have the rest of their life once they're found not guilty to live, rather than it all being destroyed in one quick second. Finally, I just don't believe that the death penalty is a very bad punishment. If you live in an efficient death penalty place where you get killed a week after your sentence, or even in China where they take you out of the court and they execute you in a van on the way to the crematorium, that isn't that bad of a punishment. What, it's like 7 days, a week of anguish, fearing death, and then everything is over. You're happy and relaxed and chilled out. Or spending 40 years in prison, hating every second of it. I really think it's pretty obvious what the worst punishment is. So I strongly disagree. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. I don't really like the tone of that, but I kind of get it. You need people to be leaders and you need the citizens to follow the rules, but the leaders should also follow the rules. So I don't like the command word, but on the whole, I agree with it. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Wrong. If you asked me 2 years ago, I would disagree, but just because it's abstract art doesn't mean it's art. It doesn't mean it's worth anything. It doesn't mean it has any worth, but it or any value, but it doesn't mean it's not art. It still comes under the definition of art. You can ask any professor of art or expert in art if abstract art is art, and they will coin it as art. So therefore, let them decide. It's like telling a physicist that their theory is wrong because it doesn't kind of adhere to what you believe is true. When that's what they love and that's what they've studied for decades. So disagree. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. Strongly disagree. In societies where they focus on rehabilitation more, the reincarceration rates are tiny compared to where all they do is punish, like America. So strongly disagree. If you want to build a better society, rehabilitate more than punish. If you want a terrible, or a terrible society full of crime, just go and straight away punish the hell out of everyone and don't even try and educate or rehabilitate prisoners. It's a waste of time to try and rehabilitate some criminals. This is kind of a misleading question. Of course, it would be a waste of time to rehabilitate some criminals, but it doesn't mean it's a waste of time to rehabilitate 99.9% of criminals that it will work on. So, I agree, but it's kind of that will come across as me saying something else. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. It completely depends on what they do. If the writer and the artist If the writer is sending political, economic, historical message, which is very important for society, or they're a philosopher, or writing a scientific paper, they're going to be more important than the business person and the manufacturer. If the writer is writing a story about a rabbit, and the business person is, selling a product and it's got many people employed, and the manufacturer is creating that product, and it'll be good for the economy, they'll better. But because I prefer idea of someone writing a scientific paper or coming up with a breakthrough or creating a socio-economic message, I'm going to disagree, but that might not be statistically correct. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. I watched a clip of Ben Shapiro doing this test, and I'm devastated now that I'm going to have to completely agree with what he said. This is trying to make you seem misogynistic, and what he should say is mothers and fathers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. I believe that a mother and father inherently, not so much that they have they should be forced to, well, not forced, but they should be forced by their morals to look after their kid before anything else, let alone their career. And therefore, I think mothers should do that. But it's not because I believe the role of a mother is just to be at home and look after the kids. So they can have a career too. But I think the role of a parent, a unisex parent, is to look after their kids before anything else. So I agree, but not for the reason it wants me to. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. I agree with that. When you look at the statistics about, not all of them, but a lot of big companies will go in, rip all the fossil fuels out of the ground in the country and take away all their wealth. So yeah. Making peace with establishment is an important aspect of maturity. Wrong! It's not. Until the establishment promotes egalitarianism, I will never come to peace with the establishment. It's more of an aspect of weakness. Okay, 5 of 6. Astrology accurately explains many things. Astrology accurately explains nothing, in my opinion. Absolutely nothing. I strongly disagree. She's not even an opinion, it's factual. The arbitrary position of the stars in the sky when you were born does not determine anything. You cannot be moral without being religious. Strongly disagree with that. Do you think that Moses' supporters, before they climbed Mount Sinai and he killed them all for looking at an idol, were all raping, murdering, and cheating on each other? Certainly not. Religion was created by man, and if religion instilled morals are also man-made. Charity is better than social security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. I strongly disagree. I think charity is often a sign of a ruthless neoliberal society that doesn't care about its citizens. And more charity, the less social security. And if you have a real good social security system, you don't really need any charity at all. Some people are naturally unlucky. No one is naturally unlucky, but some people just do stupid things or are bigger risk takers, which means they're more likely to make bigger mistakes. It is important that my child's school instills religious values. Strongly disagree. It's important that my child's school, if I had a child, or if I had a child in the future, instills moral values. Moral values are very important, but moral values, religious values, subtract the moral values, is the hateful, genocidal, homophobic, transphobic remains of religion, or at least the monotheistic religions. So, no. Look at sex. Okay, sex outside marriage is usually immoral. Strongly disagree. I don't know why you would think it's immoral. A same-sex couple in a stable loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Strongly agree. I think that's worded in a way which makes it seem that the zeitgeist is that they should not be allowed to be able to adopt children. I think our minds and our social zeitgeist should have been emancipated from the idea that same-sex couples are less deserving of having adopting kids than normal, not normal, I would say cisgender or usual couples, so that's wrong. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for adult populations. Strongly agree. I don't see why you wouldn't believe that. There's nothing illegal about it. I agree, because sometimes I've read into this recently, porn websites. Private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Strongly agree. I don't really believe I need to elaborate on that. No one can feel naturally homosexual. If you actually believe that, you repudiate all scientific research done into the subject. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. I disagree. I think openness about sex stops people from getting AIDS, STIs, and other people pregnant. So I disagree with that. Okay, so in the introduction, we explain the inadequacies of the traditional left to right line. I agree that it does have many inadequacies. As I said, maybe I'm as equally left-wing as Stalin, but me and Stalin will disagree on pretty much everything we talked about. And the reason why is Stalin is authoritarian left-wing. He has maybe all the good traits about inclusivity, and it's all destroyed by the authoritarian mindset. I'm not even as left-wing as Stalin, but I think Stalin's not particularly. He's not really left-wing. He's just authoritarianism ruins him in the same way that not all the time, but I would way rather agree with someone who's right libertarian than who's right authoritarian. And sometimes I'd way rather agree with someone who's right libertarian than left authoritarian. So I don't know if I could explain myself perfectly. And I don't want to sound like I have any shared qualities with Stalin, because I oppose almost every postulation of his whole political career. But I do. That's just kind of explaining how it's not perfect, the left-right line. If we recognise what this is essentially, an economic line, it's fine as far as it goes. We can show, for example, Stalin, Mao, Zedong, and Pol Pot with their commitments to a totally controlled economy on the hard left. See, I don't believe in that. Socialists like Mahatma Gandhi and Robert Mugabe would occupy a less extreme leftist position. I don't consider myself to be like Mahatma Gandhi or Robert Mugabe. Margaret Thatcher will be well over to the right, but further right still would be someone like the ultimate free marketeer and her best friend and genocidal leader, General Pinochet. That deals with economics, but the social dimension is also important in politics. That's the one that the mere left-right scale doesn't adequately express, so we've added one ranging in position from extreme authoritarian to extreme libertarian. Both the economic dimension and the social dimension are important factors for a proper political analysis. By adding social dimensions, you can show that Stalin was an authoritarian leftist, i.e. the state is more important than the individual. I completely repudiate that. And Gandhi believing in the supreme value of each individual and a liberal leftist. Is a liberal leftist. While the former involves state-imposed arbitrary collectivism in the extreme top left, on the extreme bottom left is voluntary collectivism at regional level, with no state involved. Hundreds of such anarchist communities existed in Spain during the Civil War period. You can also put Pinochet, who was prepared to sanction mass killing for the sake of free market, classic Pinochet, who is also endorsed by Margaret Thatcher, on the far right, as well as in a hardcore authoritarian position. On the non-socialist side, you can distinguish someone like Milton Friedman, who's an anti-state for fiscal rather than social reasons, from Hitler, who wanted to make the state stronger even if he wiped out half the humanity in the process. This chart makes clear that, despite popular perceptions, the opposite of fascism is not communism but anarchism, i.e. liberal socialism, and opposite of communism, i.e. entirely state-planned economy, is neoliberalism, i.e. extreme deregulated economy. I agree with that. The usual understanding of anarchism is a left-wing ideology does not take into account the neoliberal anarchism championed by the likes of Ayn Rand, Milton Friedman, and the American Libertarian Party, which couples social Darwinian right-wing. Sorry, it's people take this social Darwinian thing the wrong way. I think it's just like this. Darwinian wasn't saying this kind of evolutionary thing. Evolutionary economic idea was good. It's just how the species were created, and it was majestic and beautiful. Not that it was a morally good action to take in an economy. Okay. I've gone through the more important stuff. So, your political compass. Okay. Wow. So I scanned through this the other day, and I also did it. But this is my first time properly reading through everything, and it has changed quite significantly. I'm not as far left as I thought, and I'm not quite as libertarian. So it has changed quickly, and I think it's because I changed my mind on strongly agreeing on someone's, but well, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm not too far from Gandhi, to be honest. Slightly more libertarian. There's not. This seems like the most common box for people I know. Okay, so if you've got all the way through, thank you ever so much for watching, and that is me done.